So welcome to lecture 2 of Mind and Reality. One of the things I really miss with the online lectures is seeing all of your smiling faces at the beginning of our lectures and greeting many of you as I go and hand out. I used to hand out handouts so I could greet many of you individually. I hope that we're going to find some substitute for that. Anyway, here's lecture 2. We're going to start by thinking about Russell's principle of acquaintance. The question that we are concerned with for this part of the course, one of our 7 questions, is how do our thoughts connect to the things about which we think? When I say think here, I mean that in a very broad sense. So if you are, for example, frightened that a tiger is about to bite you, in being frightened you're thinking about the tiger. Likewise, once the tiger has bitten you, let's say, and you're angry now with the tiger for biting you, bad tiger! In anger, you are thinking about the tiger in this broad sense of think. So we're using the term think in a very broad sense to include emotions that you might have about a tiger or about a snake or some other thing. Also intentions, desires. You might want the tiger to go to its corner and learn not to bite people. It's a very bad tiger, naughty tiger. You are, in this broad sense of thinking about the tiger, as you are if you have some beliefs about the tiger. You believe that the tiger only bit you because it was really upset about what the snake did to it earlier, or you know something, right? So you may know that although the tiger bit you, it doesn't really dislike you in any particular way. It's just how it sort of relates to things. Why are you hanging out with the tiger? I don't know. It's to illustrate the point about thoughts, isn't it, though? A thought is really something very broad. An emotion, a desire, an intention, a belief, a knowledge state, any of that will include a thought. Now, I want to take this question here. Now, this isn't quite the question that I want to address. So I want to just give this a slight twist. It's something very closely related, and the twist will help us. So we can ask, instead of that first question, we can say, what sort of relation between a subject and an object has to obtain if the subject is able to think about the object? Yeah, makes sense? Good. Okay, so here's the question we're going to focus on, and the idea here is that a subject is just that which thinks. So if you have a thought, you are the subject of that thought. When I have a thought, I'm the subject of that thought. If the tiger's thinking, gosh, I really wish I hadn't bitten her, the tiger is the subject of the thought, right? I don't know why the tiger would think that, but maybe it does. Anyway, there we go. The answer that we're interested in is given to us by Bertrand Russell. The answer is that the relation in question is one of acquaintance. What relates you to the things that you think about when you're angry that the tiger bit you, for example, is that relation of acquaintance. It's your acquaintance with the tiger that enables you to have thoughts about the tiger. This, of course, raises the interesting question, though, well, what is acquaintance? What is acquaintance? We've got to work that out. Okay, good. So Russell tells us, he says, acquaintance essentially consists in a relation. Acquaintance essentially consists in a relation. That's very good. So if I have, something here, I haven't really got anything handy actually. I've got a light bulb, okay? Let me show you a light bulb. Now, at the moment I stand in a relation to this light bulb, I am, from your point of view, I think, left of the light bulb. I'm very bad at left and right, so perhaps that's wrong. Anyway, I bear some relation, spatial relation to the light bulb. I'm either left of it or right of it. The light bulb is certainly to my right. So this is a relation. A relation is something that connects two things. Now, importantly, Russell, of course, was really into his logic, as you will be very soon, I'm sure, because you're philosophers, mostly. A relation, something that can only relate things which actually exist, right? So can only relate things that actually exist. You can only be acquainted with something if it exists. Very good. So to say that acquaintance is a relation is already, in a way, quite informative, although, of course, everything is related to everything. We need to know which relation it is. It's quite informative, but it's not informative enough. Which relation is acquaintance, Mr. R? Well, he says it's a relation between the mind and something other than the mind. Very good. But what's that relation? What's that relation? Well, Russell says we have acquaintance of anything with which we're directly aware. Directly? What's that? That means, in this context, says Russell, without the intermediary of any process of inference or any knowledge of truths. So it's a relation that we bear independently of anything that we might know or believe about the light bulb, or anything that we might infer about the light bulb. There's me and the light bulb. And Russell goes on and he tells us that there are these things which are thought to be modes of acquaintance, so things like perception. My perceiving the light bulb period is I'm perceiving it, you're perceiving it. So in virtue of perceiving it, we are acquainted with it. Perception is a mode of acquaintance. or, you know, I take the light bulb away and now you remember the light bulb and so do I. So we're acquainted with it through memory. And there may be other ways that we can be acquainted with things, so self-awareness or attention. Who knows? These may be modes of acquaintance. So now we've got some understanding what this idea of acquaintance is. Acquaintance is a relation between a mind and an object, which involves awareness, but not just any old kind of awareness. Awareness which is direct in the sense that it doesn't involve the intermediary of knowledge of truths or inferences. Marvellous. And Russell goes on, and just as you'd expect, he says, knowledge by acquaintance is essentially simpler than knowledge of truths and logically independent of knowledge of truths. I think that's sort of implied by what he's just said, but it's a terribly important idea, because the thought here is this. Our question is, you know, how is it that you can have a thought about a thing? And Russell says acquaintance is a relation which is actually more primitive than thought, and one which can explain thought. This is a radical idea. And in fact, interestingly now, most philosophers in the 21st century don't believe this, or they've lost sight of this insight, if it is an insight. So it's a view that's both fallen out of favour and is widely regarded as incorrect. Now, for the purposes of this course, it's up to you to make up your mind whether you think it's correct or not. All I'm telling you is it's worth thinking about. Right? Is there a relation, one which involves awareness of some kind, that is more primitive than any kind of thought and independent of it, and which can explain how it's possible for you to have thoughts about things? Very good. So what is the principle of acquaintance? That's very important that you know this, because one of the seminar tasks, of course, is to state the principle of acquaintance. Here's what you should say. Every proposition which we can understand must be composed wholly of constituents with which we're acquainted. Now, as you may already know, Russell actually stated the principle in 3 or 4 different ways. I don't think they're equivalent. You can state it in any of the ways that Russell stated it, and that will be fine. And if we're particularly interested in going deeper here, we might try to work out how these things are related, the different ways that Russell formulated it. But here's the principle of acquaintance. It's what I'm going to take to be our canonical formulation. Every proposition which we can understand must be composed wholly of constituents with which we're acquainted. Now there's a couple of things here, before I go on, there's a couple of things here which are mysterious at the moment, or I hope they're mysterious. So one is this notion of a proposition. I haven't said anything at all about propositions. That's going to come later. And the other thing that we're interested in is constituents of propositions. So what do we mean by constituents here? I'm going to leave that for the moment. So it may be that you're feeling quite confused. And if that's the case, that's good. You're right to feel confused. I'm afraid that a lot of philosophy is about being confused, realising you're confused and understanding why you're confused. And this is one of those occasions. But we will fill in some of the details later next week. Okay, so and Russell's claim, of course, about this principle is that all our knowledge, both knowledge of things and knowledge of truths, rests upon acquaintance as its foundation. Is that the same principle? I'm not sure. Is that the principle? Is it a consequence? It's very difficult to know. I would take this is a fine formulation of the principle of acquaintance as well. That's what I would. What have we done here? We've asked the question, how is it that our thoughts are connected to the things about which we think? We said the answer is possibly acquaintance. And then we've tried to understand what Russell means by acquaintance. And finally, we've stated the principle of acquaintance. So far, so good.